The human imagination has long been capable of conjuring up new and horrifying ways to punish supposed lawbreakers, criminals, witches, and anybody else who happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's well known that folks in the Middle Ages had a taste for ruthlessness. Do you think death is the scariest fate? Think again. There are many worse things. Torture, taxes, and cheese, to mention a few. And more often than not, it will be experienced by some unfortunate soul. The Brazen Bull. In ancient Greece, about 560 BC, the beach town of Akragas, modern-day Sicily, was ruled by Phalaris, a strong but brutal dictator. He governed a rich and beautiful metropolis with a tight grip. But one day, Peralaus, his court sculptor, is believed to have shown off his latest masterpiece to his lord, a duplicate of a bull in shining brass. But this was no ordinary statue. It had pipes and whistles, was empty on the inside, and was built over a roaring fire. This bull was also a harmonic torture device. The culprits would then be thrown through the door and trapped inside. The unfortunate soul would then be tossed into the bull when the fire had been adequately stoked, where the heat from the animal's metal body would burn him to death. The pipes and whistles transformed the damned shouts into bull snorts and growls, a touch that Peralaus reckoned would please Phalaris. Whether he liked it or not, the brazen bull was valuable to him. The sculptor's account must have greatly pleased Phalaris, since he requested to demonstrate the sound system. When Peralaus enters the bull, the lid closes and the fire is lit. As a result, he learned the invention's sound system from its true master. Fortunately for him, he was removed and did not die. While the Roman Empire was still oppressing Christians and water-based execution techniques were still in use, the Sicilian bull fell out of favor. The majority of offenders were simply dumped into boiling water or cold water that was progressively heated to a boil. Impalement. How about some additional anus method execution? The act of impalement has a long, gruesome history and was most infamously utilized by Vlad the Impaler, who ruled Wallachia in modern-day Romania in the 15th century and served as the model for Count Dracula. Impalement is the penetrating of a person by an item like a spike, pole, spear, or hook, usually by full or partial penetration of the torso, as a manner of punishment and also torture. Images sometimes show victims being stabbed through the middle and then raised upright, a method that would almost definitely result in a quick death. However, the actual procedure was far bloodier and more painful. The basic premise is that the more sharp the tip of the stick is, the more oiled it is, the faster it goes into the body, and the sooner it dies. But that's not the case. The stake was typically somewhat sharpened before being put in, point up. Following that, the victim would be positioned above the spikes, while they were partially entered into the rectum or vagina. However, the medieval killer used innovative techniques to lengthen the suffering. They kept the prisoner alive on the stick for several hours or even days by using a thick stick with a flat tip that would not readily pierce the body. Thus, employing this technique, the victim might not pass away for 4 days, penetrating organs with an awful slowness until it gradually entered the whole torso, eventually ripping an escape hole through the skin of the shoulder, neck, or throat. Broken wheel. Another traditional method of carrying out the death penalty was by employing a broken wheel. It's proof of the savagery that humans are capable of. One of the most successful innovations in human civilization, if not the most successful, is the wheel. Almost every aspect of human society has undergone a dramatic transformation, including transportation and agriculture. But this dreadful execution technique, also known as the French wheel or the Catherine wheel, required binding a prisoner to a spoked wooden wheel and breaking every bone in his or her body, starting with the legs. Long into the 19th century, slave owners in the New World employed the breaking wheel to suppress rebellion. in addition to breaking the bones of suspected sectarian foes or people who had been found guilty of witchcraft. Oh, but that wasn't the worst of it all. That was only the first act in a 2-part series. So after you have been bound and battered with hammers and mallets, they take you to a second wheel, talk about overkill, and string you between the spokes before lifting you into the air for onlookers to enjoy. Then the remaining flesh from your corpse would be picked up later by scavengers and hungry birds. Flailing. The English equivalent of being hung, pulled, and cut into quarters included the removal of sexual organs, but has any other culture ever sunk so low? Absolutely. In addition to having their genitals and/or testicles torn away and their vaginas flayed, these organs have occasionally also been eaten, displayed as prizes, or turned into jewelry. If it wasn't obvious, flailing entails removing the victim's skin by cutting into the legs, buttocks, and torso, generally followed by the removal of the skin as intact as possible. This method of punishment aimed to inflict as much suffering as possible on the victims. For many years, people have been put to death by flailing while still alive, notably in ancient Rome, medieval England, and the Ottoman Empire. Genitals aren't the only parts that have been amputated over time. Over the years, rulers have forcefully removed people's hands and toes, lips, testicles, eyeballs, tongues, nipples, noses, bones, eyelids, skin, and bones as punishment. Flailing was employed not just to discipline people who rebelled against the leaders, but also to terrorize those who thought about doing the same. Sometimes the prisoners were prepared for this torture. As you know, the body isn't really soft, so the body needs to first be softened. How did they do this, you might ask? Well, there were several techniques, but the most popular one involved leaving the victim out in the hot sun until they were fully burned. An additional option was to boil them. Therefore, they would already be experiencing excruciating pain before the punishment started. Spanish donkey. If you're familiar with a gymnastic horse, this isn't it. It looks like a cross between a gymnastic horse and a BOSM, but worse. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Spanish donkey. Although the Spanish donkey may sound like a pricey cocktail, the pain it provided was considerably worse than a hangover. The Spanish donkey was a punishment created by the Holy Inquisition in France in the 12th century. While the device went through several changes, all known versions generally worked the same way. This penalty was imposed on people who did not believe or were bad Christians. The penalty was easy. The subject was ordered to sit naked on this pointed structure until they were unable to do it any longer. Additionally, to add to their suffering, they were frequently tickled and had weights strapped to their feet. They stayed attached to the gadget until they either bled to death or were unable to stand the agonizing pain any longer. Therefore, even though this punishment is physical, a lot of it is mental. Many of the punishments stated above would kill you, but this punishment would stay with you for the rest of your life, if you can call it that at all. This dreadful machine rendered the victims virtually paralyzed from the agony. None of them ever walked the same way again because it destroyed them for the rest of their lives. Simply sitting on it resulted in genital injury, a ruptured premium, and a shattered sacrum. Honorable mention. But first, before we get to the last way to die, let's begin with some honorable mentions, starting with the rats. This is the one where a clay pot is placed, open side facing down, over a group of rats that have been placed on a criminal's stomach, chest or buttocks. Then there's the rack, which was a god-awful instrument. It was really simply a flat, noisy wooden frame, a few pulleys and levers, as well as some ropes to bind the captives. The idea behind the penalty was simple: cause as much harm as you could. If you are familiar with any witchcraft movie, you should be very familiar with the phrase burning at the stake. Then there's a puina coulée. Basically, the condemned person is beaten or whipped before being sewed into a big sack and dumped into a river or sea. They would not, however, be by themselves in the sack. They could well be accompanied by a snake, a chicken, an ape, and a dog. The boats. This is among the most truly horrible ways you could have died in ancient times. It is an extremely complicated and sadistic means of murdering their victims and committing crimes so heinous that will go down in history and be remembered with horror for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is the story of the insane mind, or minds, that invented scaphism, a kind of torture that dates back to the Persian Empire in the early 5th century BC, and is also referred to as the boats. Only the prisoner's head, hands, and feet were left exposed to the elements while he was placed nude inside a hollowed-out tree trunk. It was designed to cause the subject as much agony and misery as possible while they were still alive. Prior to being restrained, the victim would have been force-fed milk and honey, and additional honey would have been dripped over his or her body, with a focus on his or her anus or genitals. The victim would be attacked very quickly by creatures like flies and rats, who would devour the milk and honey concoction while ultimately eating the victim alive. Loneliness, insects digging into anuses, bathing in urine and excrement all contributed to dehydration, septic shock, or death. So, out of everything we've just discussed, what did you believe was a worse fate than death? Let us know what you think in the comments section below.